Welcome to Drinks Coach. Sorry about the long episode that I did last time, but there were 12 wines to cover, and hopefully it was interesting because it took me around Spain in a way that I haven't had a chance to on Drinks Coach UK so far. Please contact me, lowercase Vinesack or lowercase Drinks Coach UK on either Twitter or on Instagram. Please comment and let me know what you think of the shows. If there's shows that I haven't done that you want me to. You're watching Drinks Coach UK on YouTube. Please hit the bell to get notifications, and please subscribe. It's nice to have more subscribers because then people send me more interesting wines. So it's in your interest. Please do so. So where did I go from last time? Well, last time we kind of did a bit of a circumnavigation of this lump of earth, the Iberian Peninsula, but mostly the Spanish bit. What we're doing today is we're going to take a little trip down Ribera del Duero, the Duero River, until it becomes the Douro River, until we get to this little red bit. This red bit is the region of Douro in Portugal. What's it famous for? It's famous for vintage port, of course, but not just vintage port. It's been said many, many times, and I think not enough, that the wines, the red wines, the table wines of the Douro Valley share a lot of the majesty and finesse and potential, certainly age-worthy and everything else, of the great red wines of Bordeaux. Now, of course, the great red wines of Bordeaux are creeping up in alcohol a little bit, and they're more likely to be 13.5%, 14% alcohol than they used to be way back when, which I'm quite sure has quite a lot to do with the fact that we're feeding plastic bags to penguins and things and all that goes on, and all the ecological damage that we've caused this lovely planet of ours. But the wines of the Douro Valley have, because it's where it is, traditionally been around the 14.5% alcohol mark, and it's quite rare to find wines that have more elegance now. And these wines are actually more Bordeaux in weight, 13.5, 14, which is really, really encouraging. But what are these wines? Well, they are made at an estate called, again, Quinta do Noval. Quinta do Noval, João da Silva, a guy first created the vineyards of Quinta do Noval in 1715. If you love your vintage port, fortified wines, go back and take a look at my port episode at Christmas. Just put in port in Drinks Coach UK into Google, and hopefully it'll come up. You will discover that there are one or two really, really famous port houses, like the top Premier League. You're looking at Taylor's, Fonseca, Graham's, Dow's, War, and must never forget, and I think in so many ways the finest, Quinta do Noval. Quinta do Noval, I think, was then bought, I think, in the early 20th century by a family called the Van Zeller family, merchants from Holland. Cristiano Van Zeller is still very much alive and still very much involved in the wine trade, and a wonderful, large, characterful, ebullient man. But it was, I think, because, and without causing any aspersions here, because of the recession at the end of the 80s, Black Friday going into the early 90s, a lot of the port houses, not the families associated, were Lloyd's names. So they underwrote the debt that Lloyd's insurers had. So there was a lot of selling of old stocks of port, and in some cases selling of the entire port lodge. And Van Zeller's, I think, sold. They sold to AXA Melazine, a group of very, very fine vineyards and wineries which have been acquired by a French insurance company because they saw the robust investment in buying wines which are really well made, and stuck a dude. I'm sure, sorry Christian, dude isn't really the way I should describe you, but Christian Seeley was made managing director of said group of wineries and vineyards. So they include things like Dushnokoi Tokaj in Hungary. They include Chateau Sudiro in Sauternes. One of my absolute favourite things in the world. And Pichon Baron, currently the highest performing red wine in the whole of Bordeaux, with the possible exception of the first growth. Do I sound a favouriteist? Possibly. But pound for pound, if you put Lafite against Pichon Baron wins. I'm sorry. Enough, Christian? Okay, so he also has this wonderful, wonderful jewel to look after, and recently added to it with the purchase of a Quinta called Quinta de Pasaduro. But Quinta de Noval is really, for me, the jewel in the crown of all all fortified red wines in the world. But he has taken a very serious stance on making really fine red wines. In the way that he makes very fine red wines in Bordeaux, he started to produce a range of wines, which, since he started, I think, would be as soon as 2013 that his first releases came out. Maybe it was, 2003. Oh, goodness me. I can't remember. Maybe it's longer than I think. But these wines are wines that clearly aren't in Bordeaux bottles, but are wines which very proudly are emblazoned with the name Quinta de Noval, and are made in the Douro Valley. And we're getting more and more beautiful red wine coming out of the Douro Valley, which is not fortified. Of course, fortifying a red wine and then keeping it for 20 years isn't necessarily the fastest way to get cash flow in a business. But these wines take quite a long time to come round too. So patience is a virtue, should we call it. So what did he do? Well, he sent, or was supposed to do, a Zoom chat, interactive Zoom chat, which I was supposed to be involved in, but unfortunately I wasn't able to make the chat. But kindly sent me the wines anyway, and these wines are wines of great value. So I just want to declare thank you very much, Christian, for the generosity you've shown in letting me try these wines. But I think deep down you knew I was going to really enjoy them anyway, and you get something out of it. But what can I say? Maybe the people watching this show aren't the people that these wines are supposed to be broadcasted to, but I do hope they are, because they're some of the finest up-and-coming wines on earth, bar none. So, what do we have? Well, he sent me some 2017 wines, the entry-level wine, which is called Cedro de Noval, out of the front of the estate. This gorgeous Lebanese cedar of Lebanon, and it's fabulous. You will often find Christian underneath it, cigar in one hand and a port tonic in the other, welcoming guests into his beautiful, beautiful bodega or quinta. And this is the entry-level wine. Then there are a range of wines which are produced, which are single varieties. I think there's one made from Syrah, there's one from Tinta Francese, or Touriga Franca, and there's one from Touriga Nacional, which is the most famous of all the port red varieties. And then here is the Reserva, which is best practice. This is the best wine Christian thinks the vineyard can create in this mould. There you go. But what he did was he sent us the 2017s, which I tasted priorly. I haven't opened this one yet, because I've got a use for that. I want to open it with some other people, which would be better for Christian. But really was to show 2017 and 2018 side by side. I think because of lockdown, he wasn't able to come over and do an announcement and a tutor tasting in 2017, so I decided to do both vintages together. 2016, the last tutor tasting I saw him do, were wines of such exquisite beauty and such delicacy and unseen finesse, I think, from Douro before, that I've kind of been squirming around on my seat waiting to try these again. 2016 was a vintage which had such purity of fruit, was such a magnificent vintage. A vintage which, for table wines, comes but once in a generation, I think, although 2011 was pretty close. And it's like listening to the woodwind section of an orchestra. It's not one voice. There was amazing complexity within it, but there was a purity of sound too. 2017 was a phenomenally hot vintage, which was capable of making very, very good vintage port, as 16 was. But I think it was a little too hot to be making the world's greatest ever red wines. So let's call that the brass section. Okay, the 16's purity of note, 2017's a broad, flanged brass sound, sort of Richard Strauss, Mahler blast, amazing flavour, amazing sort of dryness of delivery, but also something really rather majestic about it. So I don't know how the 18s are going to turn up, because I've just poured these and I've not tried them yet. So there you go, just a quick kind of like indication of vintage quality over the last few years. I think in the Douro, 2015 was another phenomenally hot year, as 17 is, but 2012 was trickier, 13 was a bit trickier, higher acid, but 11, 14 and 16 I think were pretty good. Let's see what 18's like. Oh, before we start, I just want to say that he also launched his first white wine. Cedro de Noval, Vinho Branco, Douro DOC 2020. What was 2020 like? Well, signs are promising. Christian, in his own words, said that he thinks some of the best table wines ever made at the estate were made in 2020, which is good enough for me. What varieties? Varieties you probably haven't heard of before. The two great white varieties of the Douro, which are capable of making wines with the same finesse as Sauvignon and Semillon and Bordeaux, are Gouveia and Virginia. Now, that's all I'm going to say. This is 1/3 Gouveia, I think, and 2/3 Virginia. So Virginia Gouveia as a blend. Very fragrant, perfumed, silky textured, absorbs oak extremely well. The oak almost seems to be like a glue between the varieties. If you try those varieties mixed together, you get a lovely kind of counterpointed chord. You get a bar and bar, but then you add it to the oak, and then the whole thing becomes much more homogenised, much more together. And I thought this wine was absolutely delicious. I have no idea how that wine would age. You shouldn't have sent it to me if you didn't think I was going to drink it. So there we go. White wines of the Douro, also very, very exciting. In fact, white wines and red wines in Portugal generally just brilliant. One of the most exciting stories on the map of world wine. So without further ado, should we try the wines? Yeah, we're 11 minutes in. We should, shouldn't we? Okay, so this is the first wine. That was the Cedro de Noval 2017, which I found rather good, but lacking in suave charm, lacking in sweetness. Didn't lack acidity in any way, but it did have a suedy dryness that rather needed a squab pigeon or two to make into a complete meal. Powerful, but balanced, and I think in a vintage of such ferocity of heat was a very, very good wine. This is the 2018. From what I understand, although it wasn't without its problems and its heat spikes and so forth and rain at unusual times, 2018 is supposed to be, for want of a better phrase, the finer table vintage. Well, this is the entry-level wine. If you want to go and spoil yourself and buy a wine to take to someone's house for a roast beef or something like that, go down to your local independent wine merchants, because not other people won't. I mean, you can go to Harvey Nichols, you can go to Fortnum's, that kind of place, and they will sell these wines. And this wine's £20. Now, £20 might seem a bit steep to some people. It might have seemed quite steep 3 years ago, but it bloody isn't. Now, unoaked Garnacha from Spain costs £11. This wine is laughably good value for money. This wine is made from many different varieties, all found in the Douro. I'm just going to find the, if I can, my blurb on these wines. Yes, I have found them. Okay, and this wine will have Touriga Nacional as a core wine. Touriga is like a Touriga Nacional, very cassis or bramble fruit. It has a Christmas spice. I always get a lick of mace and clove in it as well. And is one of the few red grape varieties which, like Cabernet Sauvignon in Bordeaux, can, if made the right way with enough ripeness, can produce a balanced wine on its own. The Cedro de Noval is made from 55% Nacional. It's 25% Syrah. And I was trying to put my finger on what that was, but there is more Syrah in here than I ever remember him using before. Yeah, it smells like coal tar soap. Is that bad? No, it's got a smoky iron-like quality, which I like. It's fine, and it's fragrant. It's not clumsy in any way. But also there's Touriga Francesa, which is a variety which I know that Christian is extremely invested in and has planted a lot more in his port estates. The other estate that he looks after, the other estate that's his, is Quinta de Romanera. Lots of Touriga Nacional and a bit of Francesa, and I think that's pretty much it. There's also 5% Tinta Chow, another variety for complexity, I'm sure, which he adds to this wine. So it's a real mix, typical of the wines of this region. And also, the hotter a region gets, the more sense it makes to make a blend, because you'll get certain facets ripening at certain different times. But if it's very hot, they ripen quickly. So each individual variety doesn't have the same level of complexity as a grape variety that's ripening very, very slowly over an entire autumn. So Pinot Noir and Burgundy takes a long time to ripen, but then it develops complexity within itself. if you plant a Pinot Noir in the Douro Valley, you'd end up with the wine that just tastes of raspberry jam. But if you planted 7 other varieties that didn't taste of raspberry jam, you could orchestrate a very interesting wine. You get me? Okay, so it's still immensely young, and I should have probably given this some air. I should have stuck this in a jug. That's a lot of wine for 20 quid. Wow. You can taste all the little facets, all the faces of the diamond here. It starts off with the spice and the red fruit, the sort of like briar fruit and mulberry fruit of Touriga. Then there's this dark leathery strap from the Syrah, and then there's the herby fragrance of the other varieties. Very nice. Moving on to this, the 2017 Touriga Nacional. I have to be honest with you, Mr. Seeley, was hard work. I think I would like to have left it a bit longer, but that was a real slap in the chops. Enormous power. But not in a bad way. People love wines like that, don't they? I mean, people love wines like, I don't know, Clos de Roi Corton, things like that, which is a Pinot Noir, which kind of has nothing that I like about Pinot Noir in it, but it's still a wine that costs 500 quid a bottle or whatever. Apologies, but I mean, a very, very good effort from 2017. But I wanted more sleekness. I wanted a better tailor. I wanted a better fit rather than this brass blast. Okay, so now looking at the colour, even the colour is very, very different. The 2017 had a much more sort of like kind of a red terracotta. There was a terracotta cut through it. There was a dry leaf colour to it, which this wine simply doesn't have. It has this beautiful, beautiful purple vermilion colour. The tannins are porcelain fine. Wow. Okay. I'm doing that thing where I can't describe things because I'm having an emotional moment. This is about 20 quid. This is about 45 pounds. It's double the money. And it so tastes it. It is an incredibly good bottle of wine. Very, very fine. Porcelain tannin. Smells of blueberries. Definite violet florals. When you draw air through it, there's violets peering out of nowhere. Wondering what they're doing there, but they're there. Oh, almost tastes like Parma violets on the palate once you draw air through it. Absolutely delicious. Extraordinary wine. It seems to me thus far the 2018 is a much more successful drinkage for drinking young, certainly. And I think that the 18, I think I preferred the Cedro 16 on current showing. But judging by the Touriga Nacional 2018, I think this is the best. This last wine, there's a great portent for this wine because this wine here is definitely the best Touriga Nacional Christian's bottle so far, without a doubt, with a single doubt. The finesse of the tannins is just amazing. Okay, so this wine's even darker in colour. I don't know if you can see that. It's probably not possible. Kind of. Yeah, I think you can see it's a bit darker. Oh, sure. There's more oak in there. Of course, there's more oak. I mean, this wine's designed probably for an indefinite lifespan. Let's have a look at the actual blend. I imagine there's only. It doesn't smell as multi-varietal. I think it smells much more Touriga driven than the other wine, the Cedro, and more herb, more Cabernet Franc characters, more Touriga Francesa. All right, 60% Touriga Nacional, bit more Touriga, but it's probably from older vines and more concentrated. 25% Touriga Francesa, which is lovely, and then there's a field blend from Quinta vineyard of 15%. What's a field blend? Well, that's when you have a vineyard which has got 30 or 40 different varieties, and you just harvest them all at the same time, which adds a level of analog to the system. It's adding an unknown, adding a general soundtrack. When people make films, they do what we call GVs, which are general views, and they take what's called a wild track. So that when I'm sitting here chatting to someone outside the House of Parliament, if somebody walks past and goes, "Oi, Wenger," you can cut it out and just put in a track you've already recorded of a bus going past, and that's called a wild track. And field blends, which are quite common in Douro, have this wonderful sense of place because they're ruling out the individual varietal flavours of each wine, but you end up with this wild track which smells, looks, and just feels like the Douro Valley, and that's what's in here. It's Douro first, and then a cleverly blended red wine second. Oh, the typicity. The identity of that wine is magic. I know Dr. Jamie Good did a piece on this on Tinternet, on Instagram, and I had to applaud him. This wine's absolutely brilliant. And I'm thinking if that's 40 quid or 45 quid, maybe this is 50, 60, something like that. But we're probably talking about one of the most expensive red wines in Portugal. But, you know, spare a thought. If you're buying his wonderful wines from Pichon Baron, his second wines cost that. So I think this is a wine of astonishing quality, astonishing balance. There's so much to give. It's still incredibly primary. I think that you probably need 10 to 15 years before you see absolutely everything that's going on in this wine. But I would like to taste it for another 5. But I would like to compare it to 2016 because I think this is better. Bravo, Quinta Noval. Bravo, Christian Seeley. Bravo, the team. He also sent us a bottle of this. I'm very sorry because I drank it. This just happens. I think I was watching Liverpool lose, which is a port bottle evening. 2017, if you see it out there, is the latest vintage of his Colheita, which is a vintage tawny. This wine has spent its entire life in a barrel. The 2003, which was stunning before that, from a very hot year like 2017, was a massive success. I think the 2007, to my palate, is more elegant. Christian knows that I prefer his 2000s to his 2003s, even to his 97s. And it's a vintage of finesse and elegance. And I thought the 2007 Colheita at price was £35, I think, something like that, is one of the best bottles of port you're ever going to buy for that price. And you can stick that in your rack almost indefinitely. Absolutely delicious. There you go. Quinta Noval, table wines, and everything else. See you next time.